how to have a fight, how to have a discussion when you have issues. I think one of the Matrix films. There's somebody who says you don't really know somebody until you fight with them. There's the rabbi of the town where I live, a blessed memory. He said when his students, he was a rabbi, his students came to him with their fiancés, with their friends who they wanted to introduce to the rabbi. He said to them, "Have you fought yet?" And if they said no, he said, "So it's too early. I can't to come back to me after you fight." Because knowing how to fight is part of any relationship. So that's what we're talking about now. We talked about the beginning of last week's Parsha Vayigash, that there's this encounter, this head-to-head almost combat between Yehuda and Yosef, and we tried to look at it from a different angle about how to have a negotiation which is not necessarily antagonistic or competitive negotiation, but a more sort of partnered negotiation. Your partners in the negotiation together. That even if you're on the opposite sides, obviously Yehuda and Yosef, without them knowing it's Yosef, the Egyptian ruler and Yehuda were on the opposite sides of the table, literally, like we talked about yesterday. But and they were up against each other. They have opposing interests, so they were opponents, and yet how to try to turn a situation where even where you actually have opponents, you can have a negotiation which is more together, more partnered negotiation as opposed to opponents. And this is true even with non-Jews and even with a king, and so much more so, of course, so much more so when we turn it into relationships between Jews and even relationships between spouses and between friends. Really, you might be enemies at this issue. You'll have a negotiation about you think differently, what should happen about this issue or that issue. Even among an employer and employee, you're opposite sides of the table. You want more money, he wants to pay you less. Sure, you're opponents, but there's a way to turn the negotiation into one which can be a partnership, and together you can solve the joint problem. And that's key number one, which we mentioned last week. I'm just reiterating it. The other thing we mentioned in this success, ultimately it was a successful negotiation of Yehuda. Did you watch last week's class, or you didn't have a chance? So you're getting a little bit of a short summary to bring us up to stuff. I'm going to add more things. That's why I'm revisiting the discussion. Second thing we've noticed is that there is in this negotiation a lot of personal statements. We call them I statements. And actually being very truthful. We're going to come back to this on a more deeper level, but Yehuda speaks about what he did and what he said and what he thought and what he's thinking about it now. So he's actually very open about himself, even admitting guilt, like at the beginning, before the Parsha Vayigash, the end of Parshat. What's the one before Vayigash? Miketz. The end of Miketz, Yehuda says he admits his guilt. You found Elohim atat avon avadecha. God found our sin. And obviously he knows he didn't steal the goblet. He must be referring back to his sin. His sin, way back at the beginning of the story. How long was Yosef in Egypt for, since he was sold? How long was it? According to our calculation of the sages. Was it 17? I think more. I think 20 years. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. Rashi has this calculation about how long it was, but the Chazal say he left without a beard because he was too young, and afterwards he came back, he had a beard, that's why they didn't recognize him. So it's a good number of years. In any case, he goes back and he mentions his own faults. It's not like he's trying to, trick the other side. And also there's a little bit of admission of guilt. as I said, but also admission that the opponent's position is correct. The goblet was found. I don't know how it happened, but the bottom line is we were found, red-handed, as they say, caught stealing. And so he admits that Yosef is correct. The ruler, whoever he is, he's got him up the creek. So he's not fighting right away. The first thing he does is if I say, you say X, I say Y. The first thing is, first of all, the approach. As we said, more of a partnered approach to the problem. The second thing is speaking truth. Very honest way about yourself, and even admission of guilt and admission of that the other person's position has validity. He's right. What a strange way to negotiate, to say that the other person's right. You want to ultimately move on from there to say how maybe I have another perspective to add to that. But to start off by being very honest is something, is point number 2. Okay. That point number 2 and number 3, we mentioned that honesty, but also talking about yourself, not about the other. And even when he starts to make his claim, he makes it. He says, what's my position going to be like when I go up to my father? How can I go up to my father? He's going to die, and so forth. Now, another critical part of this type of negotiation that we're trying to focus on is the stage. Sometimes people have, in Hebrew it's called siach chershim. It's a dialogue between the deaf. Nobody's really listening to the other. Each one wants to say their claims and talk. But you know how when you have in the olden times there was CB radio. You know what a CB radio was? That you had this microphone that you had to push down with your thumb. You push down when you wanted to talk. And then you would talk, and then when you lift up your finger, then you'd be able to hear the other person could talk. But as long as you're pushing down on the button, you can't hear anything. The other person cannot break in. So each one has control of the microphone, essentially. And there's only one microphone, only one. And so sometimes people, when they negotiate, when they talk, when they discuss something, they just put their finger on that button and they don't let go until the end. That's it. And they're just talking. They're not listening. And here, at the very beginning, Yehuda says to Yosef, "Yedaberna avdecha davar beoznei Adoni, let me speak in your ears." He's asking for Yosef to hear him. I know we have different opinions. I know we've got a problem here. I know you think that you said I'm going to be slave, whatever, and or Binyamin's going to be your slave, and we're all going to leave. But first thing is you have to have listening. Did you ever hear this before, that someone is described as a good listener? There's such a thing as a bad listener. Seems silly, right? What's a bad listener?
Someone who doesn't listen.
What does that mean?
Doesn't shut up.
It doesn't shut up.
It doesn't open to the ideas. It's just
Right. So technically, physically, like I said before, sometimes you can just put your, I don't hear you, right? Or you can just be talking all the time, and so you can never hear. But even if you are not talking all the time, and you are listening, sometimes you're hearing and not listening. But what do we say every day? Shema Yisrael, Shem Echad, Shem Echad. How do you translate that? Hero Israel. Hero Israel. So what's the difference between hearing? There's another translation. Listen. What's the difference? Hear and listen.
Understand.
Right. So, I mean, I can go on for this for 40 minutes, but the most basic understanding is, hearing, audition, right? Audio, listening, right? Audio, listening, hearing that happens automatically. If someone is speaking, if there's a noise somewhere, you hear it. The vibration goes into your eardrum and it bounces off and you hear it. There's no choice. It's not really volitional. Everybody hears if you have a working eardrum, Baruch Hashem, and you have the faculty of hearing. So, Shema Yisrael, listen. Are you really supposed to be listening to something? Is it really about hearing with your ears? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Where is that? So there's a drasha. Chazal talk about how when you say Shema, there's a machloket Tanaim. One opinion is you only fulfill the Shema if you actually say it out loud, because then you can hear it. You have to be able to hear it. So if you're deaf, you can't fulfill the Shema, according to this rabbi. The other rabbi, we pass him like the other one, that it's kosher even if you don't say it audibly. If you can't hear yourself, it's still kosher. You should say the words with your mouth. You should mouth them, but you don't have to hear them. But it's still, till this day, it's better. It's considered to be a higher level of performance if you actually hear yourself saying that. But that's not the pshat. If that's not the pshat, if you're yotze, if you fulfill your obligation of Shema even without actually hearing the words, Shema Yisrael Hashem Hashem Echad, so what does it mean? Hear, O Israel. We use it as a metaphor. A metaphor for... So that in English you could say that listening is maybe the biological act, and hearing, or the opposite. I don't know which is more biological and which is more...
I think hearing is more biological. Listening is like you pay attention.
Listening is more paying attention. Yeah. Right, so paying attention, yeah. Okay, yeah. Hearing is the biological function, just to hear, right? You have a hearing impaired, right? You need a hearing aid, right? So the hearing is the biological function. So when we say Shema Yisrael, we're not actually talking about to hear, but to listen. To listen means to pay attention. Paying attention, it usually means to understand as well, as Aaron said. So you have to listen. So when we say you can be a bad listener and a good listener, you're going to hear the other person. Even if you shut up and you do hear what they say, you could be not listening. You could be hearing but not listening. Now, listening is an art. It's a technique which really I took a course on. And I want to share some of the insights with you. Not today, but another time we'll practice listening. It's actually... let me give you the classic example, okay? The guy comes home from work and he's sitting on the couch and he wants to chill out, read the newspaper or even watch TV or whatever it is. And his wife comes home from work and she wants to talk to him and tell her about her day. And, so he's hearing her. He nods, says yes, but really his mind is on something else. He wants to be watching TV, or he wants to be watching the news or reading the newspaper, whatever it is. And she says to me, "You're not listening to me." So I know I can repeat everything you just said. So and so said this, and then I lost my laundry, and everything that happened you could repeat. He says, she's frustrated because you're not really listening. Maybe he's hearing, but he's not listening, not paying attention. Not paying attention, and she's not feeling heard. You ever heard that expression before? To feel like you've been heard. Really, what it means is to feel that you've been listened to. That means that you've been given attention and understood. So we mentioned also that the fact that Vayigash Elav Yehuda sort of separates himself off from the conversation that was before, and he starts to say, "Let me speak into your ears." Let me say words into your ears. He didn't just mean, everything you say is going to go into his ears. What do you mean, let me say words into your ears? He was asking him, please listen. Now, I want to say something new, something different. You have to pay attention. So setting up the systems, not just setting up the conversation as different than what was before, and maybe having a different approach, like we started off with a more partner approach as opposed to an adversarial approach. It might include also this idea that for this type of negotiation to work, both parties, ideally, both parties have to be willing to actually listen to the other and to pay attention to the other and not just, sometimes the conversation is just an excuse for me to say what I want to say. As a teacher, I try to be a listener also, and I do try to listen to my students. Sometimes the students have good things to say and they add to the class, and usually that's the way it is for you. With you guys, you're great, and the interaction is very good. But sometimes there's a student who just, he doesn't get it and he's really off track and he's not just, so I try to not listen to him and continue with my class. Okay, I'm a teacher, it's different, but when you're in a conversation or in a negotiation, to be a success, we're trying to find the keys to success here. So true listening is another key. Now there's one more, the clincher, the final thing that I want to talk about, but I'm giving you some basic principles of mediation. Right, this is called, in most countries, in most legal systems, they've realized the importance of mediation as opposed to the judge coming, right? Two sides come, and there's a court case. This one claims he owes me $1 million. This one says, no, I only owe him $100, or I don't owe him anything, or he owes me $100, $1 million. Many times, the classic way of judging the case is each of the parties speak to the court, speak to the judge, and the judge listens to the arguments, and then he listens, this next guy says his arguments to the judge, and the judge listens to the arguments, and then he makes his decision. One guy wins, one guy loses. The legal systems around the world have found that as great as that system is and as necessary as it is sometimes, because otherwise they just shoot each other, right? It's better that they accept the rule of law, and it's better that there's some kind of a system. There's a better system, and it's usually better for situations where there's ongoing relationships. It's not just, some business deal that you see person once in your lifetime and you move on. Okay, they can't get to an agreement, so the court will decide for them. But when there's continued relationships, like people who are a worker who still wants to work for the company, or somebody who, or people that, people are getting divorced, for example. So people are getting divorced, and they have common children. They're still going to have relationships with each other. They have things to work out. It's much better if it doesn't come down like Moshe from the mountain. It doesn't come down, this is the law. And usually one person feels like he won, the other person feels like he lost. When you have a winner and a loser, so the winner's happy because he got his money, but the loser is very unhappy. And ultimately, if they still have a relationship, those ill feelings that he has, they're going to come up eventually. They're going to come back. The win is not so pure and so clean if the other guy feels like, he doesn't agree with the judgment of the Lord or the court justice, whoever it is. And so the better system is what's called mediation. Mediation, it's also called ADR. ADR stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. It's a form of mediation called ADR. I took a course in it, and the principle is based on when you have these types of discussions or negotiations, you want to reach what's called a win-win solution. The result is not a win-loss or loss-win. Either way, that's not the ideal. The ideal is when you can reach a situation which is a win-win situation. Now, he wants $1 million. He doesn't want to give him $1 million. Where's the win-win situation? We're not talking about compromise here. Compromise would say, okay, $500,000. Okay, let's compromise. Both people are usually unhappy with the compromise because the guy thinks I really deserve $1 million. The other guy thinks I really don't deserve to pay him anything. So so then you have, instead of both people happy, you have both people sad. Each one feels like they're gypped out of it. ultimate goal of mediated, dispute resolution is to reach a win-win situation. How do you achieve a win-win situation? And this is ultimately what we find Yehuda suggesting. And there's one more principle that I would like to introduce to you, which is the basic principle. And I've taught this to my kids, even though none of them are lawyers. But it's very useful in life, in dating, in relationships. Whenever you're trying to reach common ground with someone who you start off at loggerheads, in a different position. And the principle is as follows. We have to separate between something called needs and something called positions. Okay? Positions versus needs. What's in Hebrew you can do it as well. Emdot or tzrachim. Tzrachim are needs, and emda is a position. So let me take the classic example. The employer doesn't want to give the employee a raise. The employee wants a raise. He wants a raise of $1,000 in his salary, and the employer, he doesn't want to give him the raise because he's trying to make ends meet. He's trying the business to be successful, and he can't give him the raise. So what are you going to do? There's really nothing you can do about it. If you give him the raise, then he'll be happy, and the other guy won't. And if he doesn't give him the raise, he'll be happy, and the other guy won't. How do you solve the problem? But there's $1,000 at stake. It's either going to be one guy's pocket or the other guy's pocket. How do you solve the problem? What do you say? Yes?
The worker works more hours and he gets $1,000.
Okay, adding more work. Good. That's a good direction. Let's say he doesn't want to work more hours. We're talking about the amount of work. For this amount of work, he thinks he deserves more. He wants to be paid more. He comes and explains, I have my skill set, I have my experience, and so, maybe he's making more, and he's making that extra $1,000. I deserve to get it. He won't be happy until he gets it. Yeah, what do you say?
You need to show himself what he is, like, how much, like, you can go to a boss, like, I want like this amount of money for each hour what I work. You need to show yourself. You need to
prove yourself. Okay, good. Okay, you're not saying wrong things, but I want to hear more. Yes,
if he can figure why is it that he really needs like $1,000 more dollars. There's an underlying thing that can make.
That's the need. That's the need versus the position. The position is $1,000 or zero. Those are the positions. Now, why, when you start to go underneath the level of what you say and what he says, you're negotiating, right? Because you have different positions. If you're at the same position, you wouldn't need to negotiate. There's different positions. That's always the beginning. The way to solve the problem. What were you going to say, Shushan?
I would say that the employee can threaten him to go to the competitors and get $1,000 from them.
It's true. Threats sometimes work, no question about it. But if he wants to work in this company, he actually likes the company. He wants to work there. He just wants more money, so he doesn't. So he'd be shooting himself in the foot because he doesn't really want to leave. If you would want to leave, bevakasha, you can leave.
Say that Chef Yoel pays $2,000 for the work and Moshe only $1,000. So if you want to be like a competition and hold up.
Okay, so you can make arguments, no question about it. But I think there's two issues. One is what Russell was saying. The second one is the classic example is when you have a pie. Everybody wants a piece of the pie, right? This one wants $1,000. The other one wants $1,000. Everybody wants. Imagine there's a pie. There's only one piece of pie left, and there's two people who want that piece of pie. In the end, one person's belly is going to be filled, and the other one's not. What's the solution? The metaphor used is enlarge the pie. How can you make the pie larger?
to put some people away.
Maybe. maybe, but there's other ways. What does it mean to enlarge the pie? It means that, let's look at the wider context in what a person gets when he goes to work. Of course, he gets a paycheck, but he also gets friends. He gets stature. He gets a title. Maybe he's called a senior programmer or manager or a director. And the worker, the employer, what does he get? So he gets the work that's being done, but he also gets maybe loyalty, that the person will stay with him for longer. Maybe an employee can work better or worse. He can get more bang for his buck. He can get more out of the worker if he works smarter. If someone gains more experience, then he does a better job. So there's a lot of other things that are involved in the negotiation, which actually perhaps may stand underneath, like what Russell said, underneath the positions. The positions were $1,000, zero. But the needs, actually, you know what the guy wanted $1,000? It's not because he needs more money. He has enough money, but he wants to feel that he's appreciated. That the other guy that's doing the same work that I do, he gets the extra $1,000. Really, I don't need the extra $1,000. I'm okay. He's got 3 kids. I only have 1 kid, or whatever it is. It's not really about the money, but he needs the recognition. He wants to feel that he does good work. It's just, and so maybe perhaps you can fill that need with a different position. You know what? We won't change the salary, but I'll give you a new title, or I'll give you a new project, or you be in charge of the entire different. We can change up the job if you are able to realize what's going on, what he really needs underneath. What he needs is recognition. And the employer, does he really need that $1,000? Is that really so critical to him? No. He can also, his business is going well enough, he can give him the extra $1,000. Why doesn't he want to give him the $1,000? Because then he'd have to give it to everybody else across the board. He'd have to, if you give an extra $1,000, the next day everybody's knocking on the door, can I have a raise, can I have a raise, can I have a raise? Everybody's going to hear what happened to him. So maybe there's a way around it. Maybe he can't give him $1,000, but maybe not as a salary. Maybe he can give him a car. Maybe he can give him an extra perk in another way, which is worth $1,000. The money really does not what bothered the employer either. The problem was, the relationship. And as Shushan originally said, well, maybe he can give him the extra $1,000 if he puts in a few extra hours of work. And then it doesn't break my scale for all the other workers. And you get the extra money that you need, if that's really what the need is. Try to find a way to make that. I'll get you that extra $1,000 if you put in the extra time. And the fact that you put in the extra time, I can show to the others that we're not raising the scale of how much it's not gonna have ramifications across the board. And maybe all 100 workers, that'll be $100,000, and then that's already not going to make the business work. So this principle is true not only when it comes to employees and employers and money, also when it comes to other negotiations. And that is, if you just focus on the positions, very quickly, you're head to head, you're against each other. It's either $1,000 in my pocket or in your pocket. There's not much to discuss. But if you enlarge the pie, you see what else is going on in this relationship. What really, and why? What's the reason why you're asking for the $1,000 or you're trying to say no to the $1,000? What's the reasons, the needs, okay? The needs behind the positions or underneath the position. Position is an external, almost arbitrary demand. And if you focus on those demands, then there's not much to negotiate about. If you focus on the positions, you won't get very far. If you try to understand what the need is, then perhaps you can come up with a better solution. What does Yehuda say? Going back to Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda what did Yosef want, or the ruler, the Egyptian ruler? He wanted to take Binyamin, that he should be his slave, his servant. Yehuda comes in and says, well, really what you need is a slave. Okay, you're going to get one more manpower. You're going to get another servant. I'm stronger than Yehuda. I'm stronger than Binyamin. Binyamin's a little kid. I have this talents. I can maybe even be a manager for you. I have experience. I have flocks. We know that Yehuda was quite a businessman in his commerce. So Yehuda is saying, let's think out of the box. Originally, I even offered you, we'll all be slaves. We'll all be slaves. You came back to me and said, no, I only need one slave, so it'll be Binyamin. So, well, let's come up with a new solution. Maybe your need can be filled. And in terms of you wanting to punish us, you want us to show us, he's showing how he is contrite and he's been honest, that he feels his guilt and he recognizes that you're actually right. Something, we were caught red-handed. The goblet wasn't one of the... So maybe the punishment aspect can be fulfilled if one of us stays, and the one can be me instead of Binyamin. So he's really negotiating based on the principles that we've been discussing to achieve a win-win situation. Obviously, it's not such a win for Yehuda, who has to be a slave, but as far as he's concerned, that's better than going up and killing his father. Binyamin will be able to go back to his father. So we've added in some more principles of negotiation. It's actually there's more to talk about. Maybe another time we'll talk about principled negotiation as opposed to just trying to grab whatever you can. But I think we've. I want to go one step further, and this is really a whole nother ballgame. This is what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. Is beyond alternative dispute resolution. It's beyond negotiation. Partnered negotiation versus adversarial negotiation. It goes much deeper. Just to summarize, we spoke about a few things. You can and should try to resolve and negotiate as partners as opposed to as enemies. You should set up a situation where there's actual listening that is going on. People will be able to listen to each other, not just yelling at each other. The way to start that is to be truthful, even to admit points. It's like when you play chess. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to get, further. So be willing to admit some of the claims of your adversary is true. And speak about yourself. I statements versus you statements. Don't try to stay away from the accusations or the telling them what they feel. Speak about how you feel in yourself. And finally, today we spoke more about this this idea of trying to reach a win-win solution based on not wasting your time at the level of positions, but trying to go underneath and understand what are your basic needs as well as his basic needs. And of course, the listening will help you do that. They'll help you understand, when you try to get deeper. The next part I'd like to talk about now is more internal. When you're facing someone who you're angry with, or they're angry at you, you might even hate them. You hate them. And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says this at the beginning of Parshat Vayigash. He says, the Yehuda's stance at this point, the most natural place for him to be would be hatred. Because this ruler is ruining his life. He's being mean. He's being dishonest. He's planted this goblet. He doesn't believe him that they actually did steal the goblet. And not only that, if we look at the bigger picture, he's from the sons of Yaakov, believer in one God. Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. And there was this Egyptian, some kind of pagan. He's some kind of even a sorcerer. He says he divines magically through the goblet. Nachash, right? Nachash is a type of sorcery. So this pagan and cruel ruler, of course Yosef hates him. Yehuda hates him. Yehuda despises him. He's very angry at him. Or Chaim HaKadosh says, what Yehuda wants Yosef to listen to him. He wants this ruler to listen to him. What happens? What does the pasuk say? Mishlei kemayim hapanim el hapanim ken lev adam el adam. Like water reflects a face back to you, like a mirror, so too a heart of a person is to the other heart. He says, okay, Yehuda, you're begging this ruler for compassion. How's he ever going to have compassion if he feels from you hatred? If you feel hatred in your heart to him, he's going to hate you back. He's going to feel that back. So one thing that you can control in this situation is yourself. Believe it or not. He says Yehuda took a moment and he worked on himself. He tried to find place in his own heart where he could appreciate the ruler that was standing in front of him. The ruler who was his enemy, the ruler who was antagonistic, the ruler who was a cheater, the ruler who was a pagan. Yes, even in the pagan, you can find some room of love in your heart, some room in your heart for love, even for that ruler. And that is going to be the key for him to have compassion back on you. So this is already, there's a rabbi who is a great educator. His name is Rav Dov Zinger. He loves word plays. He doesn't really know English so well, but he says you go to the hospital and you have a special machine. Right? There's x-rays and there's ultrasounds, and then if you need to see not bones, but you need to actually see tissues, there's a very advanced diagnostic machine. It's called an MRI, right? Magnetic resonance instrument or something like that. So the Rav Zinger says, I'm going to use those words in Hebrew. Hem, are, I. They, hem, they, are in English, I in English. Hem, are, I. The way they feel reflects how I feel. There's a connection between people. When people interact with each other, sometimes, when you feel anger in your heart, you think, or that you feel that they're angry, it's because you're angry yourself. So like what I was saying, the Or Chaim said, Yosef had to find some compassion in his heart towards that ruler. Like we mentioned it before on a technical level, that he even admitted that, from his point of view, he's correct, that his decision is correct. Here it's even deeper. This idea of love and versus hatred or compassion. It's not just a question of, admitting, like putting down a pawn so that you can gain technically in your negotiation. It's actually truly working on yourself. If you want the other person to agree with you, to come closer to you, you have to be willing to come closer to them. You have to be willing to soften up your position. And the feelings that you have towards them are going to impact the feelings that they have towards you. It's like a metaphysical principle of relationships. And so the very first part of that, therefore, the most important part of having a successful negotiation then is to work on what? oneself, to work on yourself, to really be aware of what emotions you're having inside you. How are you feeling about it? Sometimes you're very, very angry at someone because he's annoying you. Has that ever happened to you, David?
Yes.
Yes, okay, it does happen. Okay. Sometimes this other guy, maybe he's a guy in shul. Okay, let's keep it simple. There's a guy in shul and just everything about him annoys you. He leaves his tissues, he speaks too loudly, whatever it is, he's messy, I don't know. Just something about him annoys you. Or somebody in your room, okay? It's just... You want to solve that problem? Ask yourself, why does it bug me? It's true that he does leave his tissues around. It's true that he's a little loud. But why do I care so much? It's not, don't go simple, well, I'm trying to sleep and he stops me from sleeping. Maybe there's something about myself that, I've been working on to be very neat. And I put a lot of efforts into being neat because I wasn't always so neat. And, I'm doing my best trying to make this room neat. And then he goes ahead and, so it's not about him. It's about me. It's what I am feeling because of what's my weak spot, what's my sensitive spot. So the first way if you want to have a successful interaction with him is to understand yourself. Usually somebody really, really bugs you. It's not so much about him, it's more about you. Why does that bug me? And, what are the issues that I have? I have a sensitivity to neatness, or I have a sensitivity to loudness, or, so this is already internal work to be aware of yourself, to know yourself. As a matter of fact, one of the languages, going to go back to the Parsha, what Yehuda says in the Parsha of Vigash, he says, be Adoni. Simple meaning is please. Be is a language which means please, my master. But be also means in me. My master is in me. So this can be understood that, like we said in the Orach Chaim, he has to find within himself, compassion so that the other person will be able to have compassion as well. Many times, the best way to do that, when you don't understand yourself, what's the technique? Which we're going to practice here as well. Azad Hashem. It says in Mishlei, chapter 20, Maim amukim belev ish v'ish tivuna yidlena. In the heart of man, there are deep waters. How do you draw those deep waters out of your heart? To be aware of them. Ish tivuna. You need a wise man to draw them out. Lidlot is to draw out the waters. In other words, talking to someone else can help you understand yourself. Sometimes you can figure it out yourself. I heard this great story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There's a great rabbi, Rav Tzvi Hirsch Weinberg, author of, founder of Art School, big rabbi, lives in Baltimore, and he was having doubts about his path. He was a rabbi of a shul for many years, and he was figuring out what's his next move, and he was full of doubts, and he decided, okay, I want to go and I want to take counsel with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He wasn't a Chabadnik, but everybody recognized that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was quite a wise man. And so he calls up the Rebbe in New York. He's in Baltimore. Calls the Rebbe in the office. His assistant answers the phone and says, "Yes, what's the issue?" He says, "Yeah, I'd like to make an appointment to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe." He says, "Sorry, but we're booked up for about 6 months now. There's no, oh no, I can't, listen, I really need his advice, I need his counsel, I live in Maryland, and I really need, please ask the Rebbe to make an exception. So he hears him on the phone, he goes to the Rebbe, the assistant goes to the Rebbe, Rabbi Chodrakov, I think was his name was, and he hears him on the phone that he's saying, there's this guy from Maryland and he really, really needs your counsel and he wants an urgent appointment. And the Rebbe says back to him, he can hear him on the phone. He says, the Rebbe says to his assistant, he says, Maryland, tell him to go see a fellow called Tzvi Hirsch Weinberg, who is such a man of counsel. He'll give him good counsel. So the assistant tells him, the Rebbe says, you should go see Rabbi Weinberg. He says, but that's me. I'm Rabbi Weinberg. I'm Tzvi Hirsch Weinberg. So the assistant goes back to the Rebbe, and he says to him, it's Weinberg. And the Rebbe says, no, sometimes somebody has to meet with himself. And Rabbi Weinberg goes ahead and he says that he had no choice. He took the Rebbe's counsel and he sat down with himself and he had a meeting and he took counsel with himself and he said it was the best decision he's ever made in his life. And really the process that he went through with himself led him to great advice. That is just a great story. Sometimes you have to meet with yourself. And so when you're having an argument or when you're having a negotiation or when you're very angry at the other person, you think they're all wrong. We talked a lot about the different tools and techniques of negotiation. Sometimes, though, you have to start with understanding yourself deeply. We said, maybe you don't even know why you're saying this position, I needed $1,000. Maybe you don't really need $1,000. Maybe you're angry because somebody else. Maybe you need $1,000 because your father never gave you allowance or whatever it is. There's so many things to think about to really understand yourself deeply. That's going to be the key. Bi Adoni. My master is in me. So that's why people here want to start dating, and sometimes they're in a process of tshuva, and we say to them, not yet. You got to figure out who you are first before you start dating the other person. Because knowing yourself is the first key, a very deep, deep key to having a successful interaction, having a successful relationship. So we've been talking about negotiations when you're trying to, solve a problem. But even if you're not solving a problem, there's always issues that come up. But to have that relationship, you have to understand yourself. And taking counsel with Ish Tevuna, a man of wisdom, who can draw that wisdom out from yourself. I mean, Rabbi Weinberg was able to do it for himself. But ultimately, it's a good idea to go and get counsel with somebody who you trust, who you think is wise, and he can maybe try to help you understand yourself. Many times you go to a psychologist, he doesn't tell you what to do. He helps you understand yourself better, and then you already know what to do. You already know what the issue is. You understand how to go about it better if you understand yourself better. So, okay, so we learned a little bit about, from negotiations, we got a little bit deeper into the awareness and consciousness of your own feelings. Sometimes somebody else is there, teaches you about, why does he bother me so much? Why does that issue hurting me? I need to work on X, Y, Z maybe. That'll solve the problem. And then you won't even have to fight with him. You won't even have to get him to do something different. All you have to do is develop yourself, understand yourself more about, what's bothering you and when maybe you need to fix something yourself. And it's really not his fault after all. So, Shakoyach, B'ezrat Hashem, we should have good relations.